Everyone, this will be a hip rehab focused video. Now, even if you're not doing specific rehab for the hip, or if you're coming off any surgery or any major injury, there'll still be benefit for you, because really for all of us, regardless of age, regardless of physical activity, hip maintenance, hip mobility, stability and strength is really something we should always be focusing on. You have your bigger compound lifts that ideally you're doing, things like your squats and your deadlifts, to help the overall strength of the legs and the body. But then when you dial it in to be a little bit more specific in terms of what the range is like in the hip, and we'll unpack that a little bit, it's something that's really key, because particularly as we get older and we lose a lot of function, not only losing things like muscle mass or bone density, a lot of the areas where people struggle is as ranges in the hip diminish, and so the effect there is lower down in the chain to the legs and then up the chain through the spine and through the upper body. So as I say, regardless of whether you are specifically rehabbing or not, you should still find benefit from this. The pieces of equipment that you'll need, just a soft surface to work on that you can comfortably sit, kneel and lie down on. Then a foam roller, regardless of how long or short the foam roller is. If you don't have a foam roller, what you can do is you can take 2 towels, roll them up just to create a cylinder. Then a small towel that we're going to be rolling up to place underneath the hips, and then some type of pad or cushion. As we look at the function and the motion of the hip, it's important to note that you're looking to address all of these in your rehab and in your maintenance, and really in a lot of your daily movement practice. So our key movements within the hip are through flexion, where the hip closes, extension, where the hip opens. Now that's your basic walking and gait pattern, that every step that you take, there's an opening and a closing of the hip. Okay, that's highlighted then if you had to run, sprint or march, where you're bringing up the one knee to flex the hip. Then we have the circular aspect or rotational aspect within the hip, both internally and externally. So quite simply, as the femur bone, as the knee goes out and comes in. And the biggest thing that we're looking to address here is that it's as smooth as possible through different ranges, both externally and internally. We'll see this on the ground when we come to some sitting positions. Okay. The other thing that you're looking at are abduction and adduction, where the leg moves away and comes into the body. So when you see all the different ranges that the hip has, you understand why it's so important to address all of them, and that we don't only walk and move in straight lines, but we're very dynamic in the directions that we can move, in the positions that we could take as our center of gravity changes. And you'll know this if you've ever played like a very athletic sport, be it football, basketball, tennis, okay? Or then if you've done movements outside of sitting, where your hips are very stiff, very rigid. So you're going to bring yourself to the ground, and what we'll begin with is just a check-in, just to see how comfortable or uncomfortable certain positions are. Now, starting out, if you do want to use your pad or cushion just to elevate your hips, you can do so. But you're just going to start in a basic cross sit, and this is ideally something you can get into at any time of the day. Okay? And you might need that little bit of elevation, but ideally you don't have any major pain or restriction in this position. You're going to change the legs and just notice any difference when one leg is in front of the other, because we all have a favored side that we prefer sitting to. Next, take yourself into a long sit with the legs extended out. Going into an open long sit or a straddle sit. Coming into a bent long sit, quite simply one leg is bent, one leg is straight. If you want to place a hand down for support, you can. Switching to the other side, opposite leg bent, opposite leg straight. Coming into a side bend sit, which is bending at the front leg. So if I've bent my right leg, taking the left leg back, and then seeing if you can sit. Now, you may find a difference with having your toe pointed back on the bridge of the foot, or your toe pointing out. Okay. Part of that might be restricted by the rotation in your hip, or perhaps any restriction in the ankle or the knee. So it's not a right or wrong way to do it, it's what you can. And again, all of these positions can be done by sitting on your pad, checking the other side. Now if I have my left leg bent with the foot pointed out or foot tucked under. Now that rotation that we're talking about in the hips will really be highlighted in the side bend sit position, because if I'm sitting where both knees are up and the hips are both flexed. If I take my legs one way, so here if I go to my right, I'm going to have the right leg, the right hip, externally rotated, and then the left leg and the left hip internally rotated. Okay? So hence the importance that our hips can disassociate, and very much like a joystick, or let's say two joysticks, that they can work independently. I come back to that seated position of flexion in both hips, and now I go the opposite way. Now the left leg is in external rotation, the right is in internal rotation. Okay. You would likely have a difference between both sides. My left side is generally, normally has been my stiffer side, so while it would be great for us to have a completely even balance between both hips, it's very common, even at the highest level for professional athlete, that there would be this difference from one hip to the other. The biggest thing that we're always looking for, and this is highlighted in your hip function or dysfunction, is, say for example, if I went to the one side and I could very comfortably sit here, no issue, my hips are nice and level on the ground, but then I went to the other side and really got stuck. Maybe I needed a support of the hand, I started using my back, or really struggled to get the leg down and the leg was up. This is now where you can determine the dysfunction from one side to the other, where ideally you're able to match how both sides look and feel. As you're moving in the side bend sit position, you can use your hands. So if I post up into my hands, just to allow my spine to be nice and tall, as I take the knees to one direction, my spine should stay tall without heavily hunching. If I was using the pad, which is completely fine, this will just give you a little bit of room where maybe the ground is a bit too difficult for you. And then as you change, you can post your hands, place your feet on the ground, take the knees the other way. But if you are comfortable without that pad or pillow, then you can just remove it. This is really a position that we should get into on a daily basis. So any time you can spend on the ground doing some movement in the morning is always beneficial. At the end of the day, if you are watching TV, instead of just sitting down on the couch with a heavily rounded spine, is looking to get to the ground into some of these seated positions, taking the hips through different rotational positions, and then specifically trying to get into this side bend sit so that then you can work both hips in both rotational aspects. If you now move to small towel, and what you're going to do is just roll that up. We're going to lie on our side and we're going to take the foam roller between the legs. The purpose of the next drill is to help with some of the internal rotation on the hip that we're going to be lying on, but also to bring balance to our hips. Now, even as I'm sitting here, my hips aren't perfectly balanced, and our hips should be able to take our legs at different heights to be able to freely move. But ultimately, we want our hips to sit as close to level or parallel as possible. Otherwise, if you can think of one side of the body being heavily hunched, that you were leaning to one side, you wouldn't walk like that, but we carry a lot of that misalignment in our hip as we're sitting and otherwise not aligned ideally. So you're going to come down to the ground, placing the towel underneath the hip. You're going to bring your knees in front of you. Now, your knees might be brought up in line with the hip or a little bit lower. Okay. You want to be resting on the hip, so if you had to draw a line from the top hip to the bottom hip, that they were in line, so in other words, not lying or leaning back. And then the bottom arm can simply just extend out as a pillow that your head rests on. If I use my top hand, I'm going to gently glide my leg forward and back to slide in a gentle motion. And what I'm doing here is by sliding the left leg forward and back, actually helping and assisting the internal rotation on the bottom leg and the bottom hip. Now, this is going to be a movement where you're not going to feel a huge stretch, and ideally there's no pain or impingement. If there is, just stop. So you're not trying to overreach or overstretch and compensate in your back. So it's just a gentle movement by gliding the leg forward and back. Your breathing should be relaxed. Just focusing on the quality of movement as you slide just past the bottom knee and then coming back. Okay, now we're going to change to the other side. so that towel can stay there. I'm now going to lie down on the opposite hip, place the roller between the legs. Bottom arm will extend out to act as a pillow. Be in line with the hip or a little bit. And release. Now you can come back and just feel out some of those sitting positions. I'll cross sit, switching legs, the long sit position, the open sit, the bent long sit, side bend sit, now maybe you feel a difference from having done that drill with the roller. Maybe not, it's not right or wrong. Ultimately, really the goal is, whether you are in more of a rehabilitation phase or just general maintenance, is we're always trying to make these positions on the ground as comfortable as possible for most of the rest of our life. Because as you've probably seen with anyone getting older, where a lot of hip dysfunction comes in, or hip pain, and invariably there's always a very strong correlation with older people falling, breaking hips, and actually dying pretty soon after that. So we really want to offset that for as long as possible. Okay, next we're going to move on to our hands and knees. And as we're setting up here, you're looking to put some pressure through the leg, and this will be done by going into a small contralateral pattern. This will be done by lifting the opposite hand and leg, so I'm balancing on the opposite hand and knee. So as you do so, you'll find that then there's this pressure of your knee and the femur into the hip, which you should be able to do quite comfortably because the arm is supporting you. This contralateral pattern becomes important in our crawling and our walking, but we're just doing this for some basic feedback around being able to put pressure through the knee and into the hip. Now we'll progress that a little bit more by doing an extension of the arm and the leg. So here, if I reach out my right arm and left leg, again I'm balancing on the opposite side, and then I'm going to change with the opposite arm and leg. The leg that goes out shouldn't extend up high, so you want to think of it as pushing on a wall behind you. So here, as I reach out the arm, my heel pushes out to lock out the leg. Keep the spine more neutral, looking to use your glute to hold up the leg rather than extending up and straining into your back of your neck. So just alternate sides and notice the difference, if any, from right to left. If you can think of a pole going through your hips, through your shoulders, and that we're avoiding any heavy dipping or swaying side to side. Good. From that position on all fours, we're now going to look to open the hip and close it. So in the previous movement I had said about avoiding swaying or dipping. Now the difference is going to be that as I extend that leg out, I want to open the hip, keeping the arm straight. I want to close the hip, keeping the arm straight. So here you're looking to work the internal rotation as you close. The difference is I don't want to bend the arms and completely fall or collapse away. With the leg straight, I rotate the hip as much as I can, keeping the arm straight. I rotate the hip back in as much as I can, keeping the arm straight. So you really try isolate the movement to your hip rather than excessively compensating in your spine or in your arms. As you do the movement, make sure that you can breathe comfortably. If you notice that you just can't go all the way with one leg or the other, that's completely fine. So it's important that you just work each side to its normal range, and you should be able to talk, breathe, or count. So open the hip, keep the arm straight, close the hip, open and close. Good. Coming down. Going back just to feel out your seated positions. So from the cross sit, long sit, open sit, bent long sit, side bend sit, very good. Okay, now using your pad, your cushion, which again, any of those seated positions that we were doing and retesting, you could always be sitting on that through the sequence. Okay? And just in general, if you're trying to improve your ground-based movements and your time on the ground, it's perfectly fine to always have a little bit of a pad or a cushion there and just slowly progress yourself down to the ground if being completely flat is difficult for you. When we look at hip bridging, which is often a pretty common rehab exercise that's given, and even without the pad, a lot of times what we'll see are people just jerking their hips up and down in a thrusting motion and actually using more back and hamstring. So the reason that we have this pad here is to also reinforce the tension through the inner thigh, okay, the adductors in the groin. And my focus here is to roll up the pelvis. At the top, feel that my glutes are engaged, have the hip fully extended, so open, and then being able to close and squeeze the knees and then roll back down. So it's a slower, more controlled movement than just shooting and jerking your hips up. So once again, I'm going to tuck at the hips. You want to feel that there is more contact through your spine, and you start to lift the segments of the spine up, bridging at the top, and here at this top point I can still talk and breathe normally, so no excessive strain in the neck and the jaw. I squeeze the knees and thighs together, and then I roll down the spine segment by segment. Again, tuck, slowly lift up, hips open, glutes engaged, squeeze at the top, trying to feel equal pressure of both legs closing in, rolling back down. Lightly release the pressure. Tuck and lift. Squeeze at the top. Coming back down. And then one more, rolling up. Squeeze at the top. Roll back down. And release. You can bring your knees up, just hugging the knees, lightly rolling from side to side. Here we'll have our hips in a deep flexed position, so think of being in the bottom of the squat, but generally a lot easier here because then you don't have to worry about any restriction in your ankle. You can use this time to move a little bit into the ankles, create some circles, get some motion going into them. Keep just gently pulling the knees apart. And then bring yourself up to sitting. Okay. If we return to the bent long sit position, which is with one leg straight, one leg bent, okay, the hand and the arm will always be down on the straight leg side. So that just simply acts as a post or a pillar for you, as opposed to trying to put my hand down on the bent leg side where I'm restricted, and that's not very efficient position. So with my hand posted and I have my left knee up, you can open up the space as much as you need to. You can sit on a pad or a pillow if you have to, and I'm going to gently rotate that knee down and bring it back up. Now maybe you can get to the ground, maybe not. Okay. What's important here is that as the knee goes down, you don't start to roll, compensate, or twist away. So it's important that we keep ourselves upright, the bottom leg locked out, and as smooth as possible with really minimal shift in the upper body, just rotate down and up. I'm rolling on the inside edge of my foot, and this specifically working the internal rotation of the hip. Okay, changing sides. So again, the side of the straight leg or the long leg will be the side with the arm down. The opposite leg, the bent leg, that's the one you're rotating down on the inside edge of the foot. So slowly rotate down and up. I'm using the hand here just to gently guide it down. And again, if you can't get all the way down, that's fine. Just stop to either where you feel any major restriction and don't push through any pain. And then release. Good. Okay. All these movements can be done at any time in the day. They don't have to be done in sequence. In fact, you can just isolate and pull one of them to do it as a small little movement snack. So if you have a minute, a little break in between some work or any tasks that you're doing, and you can get down to the ground, you can always pull one of these, do it for 30 seconds each side. And if you had to do that sprinkled through the course of the day, you'll actually find you can get in quite a lot of hip mobility, hip maintenance, without necessarily having to do always a half an hour or hour session, because I understand time is always a major restriction in many instances. Okay, finally we're going to finish on the roller. So what you're going to do here is get the roller underneath you. We're going to bring the legs up into the air, and you should be comfortably supported here with the roller at the top end of your hips and lower back. Okay, I can release my hands so I don't have to hold on, and my feet are free here to move. With the legs up, we're just allowing the blood flow to circulate back into the hip. We're giving our feet a rest, getting into an easy inverted position. Also something then that is good to do at the end of the day, purely for relaxation, to relax your nervous system. If you can get outside, as I am, that's even better. And begin with a little bit of motion into the feet and the ankles, paying attention to the heels moving. So not just wiggling the toes, making small circles, push and pull. And now we're going to use this position to focus on flexion and extension in the hip. If I have to hug my right knee in, I'm going to close and flex that hip. And if I lower my right leg to the ground, now I'm going to extend that hip and fully open it. I allow the knee to bend just to touch the heel. Now the challenge here comes in that it's generally the straight leg, the extended leg, that's tighter. And so now as you're going down to the ground, you might find that your body or your leg comes up. What we want to aim to do, but without forcing it into any pain, is to bring the knee as close as you can to your body with the leg extended. You might even use the opposite hand as a gentle guide and a push. Breathe in, bring the straight leg in, hug that knee, and then extend the bent leg out. Now maybe you don't quite touch the ground and it's just hovering, that's okay. Or then you can guide it to the ground with just a gentle push with the free hand, or maybe you don't even need that, and you can focus on hugging in the bent leg while letting the longer or the straighter leg get a bit heavy. Matching the movement with the breath, inhale and exhale. Breathing in, breathing out. Noticing any difference you have in either the extended or the flexed hip. Again, there is that difference that we generally carry. good. Bringing the legs up. Then we're going to finish with a cycling motion, a pedaling motion. And here what you want to feel is that you can comfortably cycle your legs, creating a smooth circle. And you'll see how the legs match in that as the knee is flexed, the hip is flexed, as the knee is extended, the hip is extended. So this goes back to our basic gait pattern of running and walking, and just how in this position being inverted with a lot less weight, a lot less pressure through the joints, that ideally you can do this quite smoothly. Maybe if your range of motion is a little bit smaller, so for whatever reason you're just doing a smaller pedal, that's completely fine. If you can really reach out, make it a nice big smooth circle, that's great. You should be doing this without any pain or discomfort into your back. So at no point should you feel like you're taking strain in your back. Very good. Okay, now you're going to reverse that, do some back pedaling with again the focus on a bent leg, straight leg, closed hip, open hip. And maybe you've just got to do a little bit of a smaller back pedal. No strain in the lower back. Comfortably breathing through the nose. And relax. Hug the knees, straighten the legs, split and cross them a little bit. And give your knees one last hug. Remove the roller. And coming up. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you did well with that. Again, this is not a sequence that you have to do in its entirety as we just did. You can literally just take an exercise, you can take a piece of it and do it when you can. In fact, if anything, I'd encourage you to try and sprinkle it through the day. While any type of hip mobility, stretching and strengthening for the hip is good, you will be better served by trying to sprinkle it through the day, having these little movement snacks, these breaks, so you can break up not only a lot of sitting, but then just keep the lubrication in the hips, if you can think of it that way, rather than only relying on one session to try and unwind and untie a lot of the stiffness maybe you've accumulated. All right, hope you're feeling good from that, and then we'll see you next time. Thank you.